Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Wow, that was random. Exceptional Radio.
Good afternoon. It is the 8th of November, and we are experiencing an Indian summer. 78 degrees in sunny Bloomington right now. But that's not what I want to talk about right now. Apparently, the the Turnip administration booked a press conference at the Four Seasons Total Landscaping facility in Philadelphia. And to clarify, the president's press conference was not going to be held at the Four Seasons Hotel in Philadelphia. The Four Seasons Total Landscaping has no relationship with that hotel. And it looks like the place is located next to an adult bookstore called Fantasy Island and a crematorium.
It sounds like a Bob's Burgers episode.
It really does. they
Sports moratorium.
Well, they set up to they set up in front of a garage door, and Giuliani, he put up some big old speech in front of a garage door. I'm sorry, it's in Delaware.
Like a bunch of gremlins.
Yeah. You know, it's just you know, I almost feel like this is a perfect reflection of the kind of competency that administration projected. Let's go do a press conference in front of a landscaping company.
Now these videos of him dancing, trying to like get people out to vote are hilarious. I mean, they were always kind of funny, but there was always this fear of like enough racist people voting. But now that we know that the racists are outnumbered, this video of him dancing is fucking hilarious. Like, we can all collectively laugh again.
Well, I think we all know that the only president that can really dance was Barack Obama. There's actually a really good video circulating. It was someone did a remix of so a month or so ago, a woman was being arrested or detained by police unlawfully, and she said, "You're about to lose your job." And so somebody turned this into a trap track. And the video, of course, is of Biden saying, "Hold on, I've got something here." And he presses play on his phone, and it's this track. And then next thing you know, it cuts to an image of Obama demonstrating that he's actually got some steps. And then it cuts to, like, Kamala Harris and Michelle Obama, and, you know, everyone is dancing to this. And, you know, they edit it so the claps happen on time. Even Bernie claps in time. Like, it's, you know, well played, internet, well played.
Donald Trump looks like he's on a fucking elliptical when he's trying to dance. Or he's trying to like downhill ski or some shit. He does the same thing every time.
It's like it's not even the Running Man.
No. It's like he can't move his feet and he can't move his hips, so he just kind of like moves his hands and his knees like he's on an elliptical.
I feel like that's the only ableist shaming that I'm willing to participate in.
Yeah.
So
he's an evil person.
Yeah. Well, you know, what's the death toll in the United States now? 243,000. That's, I mean, 200. That's today. Yesterday there was like, how many new deaths were there yesterday? Like 1,000 new deaths.
Jesus Christ.
You know what's really incredible is that 2 days ago there were 132,000 new coronavirus cases, and yesterday there were 124,000 new coronavirus cases, which means that there were more new cases in the United States yesterday than the. Oh, I got to get to this number here because it's in the middle of a page. It's more new cases than the bottom 174 countries in the world. There are 174 countries in the world that have fewer total cases than the number of new cases in the United States yesterday. I'm pretty sure that's a sign of failure.
That's a huge failure.
So it's not only a failure of governance and the capacity to unify through an understanding of political differences and being able to use that to one's advantage to sway people's opinions, but I think it's also indicative of some sort of flaw culturally, um, that there are that many people who are just willing to ignore the science, to ignore the real danger that accompanies the times that we're living in, and that has real consequences.
Well, and I think part of it is when there are consequences, there is this notion that you can shout fake news away, like, and make it as if it's like some sort of spell that gets cast over the media. You say fake news 3 times, and then the media goes away.
God, that's been like the theme of the last 4 years.
Well, like, I think we really need to clarify, like, what's the difference between what people are saying is fake news and what is facts that have been spun. Because I think that there's a distinction to be made between being able to see through some of the BS that various news sources that have their own political bias have, but being able to see, through that, and then just being fed a complete line of bullshit that isn't true and believing it because it lines up with the way you feel that day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the Trumpanzees, they just know more. They're more informed. They know things that we don't know. All you got to do is put all of the Fox News into context. Except even Fox News is urging the administration to graciously concede, along with like every other leader and former world leader. They're all saying, just graciously concede. This isn't the time. It's kind of up to Turnip to demonstrate whether or not he can be a president and be presidential and have some dignity, or if he's going to be a sore loser. I mean, he's always been a sore loser. I don't think he's ever been fired. I mean, like legit. I think this is the first time.
He's never probably worked a real job in the first place.
Well, that too, but I think this is the first time he's ever been. It's been decided by the board of directors. Hey, we don't want you anymore. We want to terminate this contract.
Yeah, no, this is why I'm more happy than anything. I don't actually really care about Joe Biden winning.
Yeah.
I care about fucking Voldemort losing, in that I know it's gonna eat him up. It's gonna eat his ego up every fucking day. Every fucking day between now and January. And then from then on, his ego is gonna be so deflated. Like, that dude's gonna be on antidepressants for the rest of his life, and he's just gonna be lashing out at people, just lashing out.
Well, it took 4 years for Twitter to get their shit together and finally start applying the "this might not be true" tag to his posts.
Yeah, instantly they're like, everything. Have to flag everything.
He lost to Sleepy Joe.
Right. Well, that's just how bad he is. And I think what's going to end up happening is Joe Biden's going to have to actually improve Republicans' lives to actually win a um, second term. If he, I mean, I don't care if
You
he
know,
wins a second term or not.
from what I've read, he's not interested in a second term. He's wants to get the country back on track. He wants to get COVID under
Good.
control. He wants to, find a way to get people working towards making the country function the way that it's supposed to work. And I can't really put air quotes on an audio based talk show, but everything that I've read indicates that he isn't even thinking about reelection. Like reelection isn't going to be on the plate at all. If anything, the reelection from this administration will be focused on Kamala Harris. And don't quote me on that because that's more than 4 years away from now. We just ended a vicious 4 year election cycle that started 2 years prematurely, and I'm
Totally did.
oh man, I'm content to give it 2 years for the midterms, but you know the general election's over. There's no need to worry about the next presidential election for a while. I think that everything that I've
Well,
read.
I think we do. I think everybody needs to be worried about it because this is where the strategy falls apart because
Oh yeah,
Democrats think about the next election
no,
immediately.
I
Oh, we
agree.
won, we got it done.
No,
And
I agree with that. I do. I just don't think that I think that we can take 5 to 10 minutes to not think about the presidential election.
no, I mean I get individually like after like obviously like I'm not thinking about it every day, but I'm just saying like I think that's always the biggest mistake that the Democrats make
Yeah.
is they immediately take their foot off the gas and they celebrate for too long. Like you
Mm,
celebrate for like a week and you get back to it immediately, but the Democrats end up celebrating for like a year. They celebrated for 2 years with Obama.
ugh, yeah.
Straight up. They celebrated for 2 fucking
And that's
years
why
with
that's why we didn't that's why they didn't accomplish anything when they had the control of
exactly.
Congress and the presidency. That's
That's
that's a really
why
good point. That's a really really good point. I just
I see it every time. It's like the celebration, they drag it out and it lasts way too long. And meanwhile, the Republicans have already gone back to strategizing immediately.
yeah.
Like they never stopped.
Yeah, that's true. No, that's a very good point.
This is that Mike Tyson shit where it's like, yeah, your opponent is like sleep right now because they're worried and tired, but now's the time for us to be training and
Actually,
getting
I
to
feel
it.
like my interest in celebrating the presidential election is pretty much at its end. I really I'm trying to enjoy the preponderance of vicious memes that have emerged, but we've had 4 years of vicious memes.
Hmm.
I'm kind of over it. I've said it for the past several months now that 2020 will be remembered for vicious memes and the mentality of hold my beer. And I think that we can we can move forward. We can come up with a new theme for 2021. It doesn't have to be vicious memes and hold my beer. It can be something different. Oh, apparently some Proud Boys got shanked.
What?
Yeah, there was some Proud Boy rally. One of their like figurehead leaders got stabbed a bunch. A bunch of
Whoa.
them. Yeah, they got
Pots and
shanked.
pears.
Yeah,
Pots and pears.
it's the kind of thing that like every a lot of people are reaching that tipping point, and of course there will be claims that Antifa this, the left this, and I don't think that it's Antifa or the left actually that's going to engage in this kind of violence at this point. It's crazy people that have
Yeah.
been pushed way past the edge that are beyond the breaking point. They're broken. and
Mhm.
and I think what I've seen from social media, my leftist friends on social media is actually exactly what you just described. They didn't vote for Biden because they thought he would do the job that they wanted. They voted for Biden to get rid of turnip, and they're still going to push really hard to change things like you know Medicare for all is still something that is important. And you know, one of the things that I keep reading is the turnip enclave keeps pushing the job unemployment rate is as low as ever right up until the pandemic. But then they also want to include that in 2020, the average American has 5,000 extra dollars in their bank account, not willing to admit that that 5,000 extra dollars was money that those people have already paid into taxes and were granted by stimulus or through PPP or through you know whatever program it was that was intended to keep the economy afloat. So this is a group of people that want to acknowledge, they want to say that the job's doing great, even though we've got record um, losses in the job market,
Yeah.
and not just like losses. I mean, there are people are getting jobs, and there is growth in the job market, and unemployment numbers are not stabilizing. But people who are not returning to the workforce, that number is continually rising.
Massachusetts is still in the top 10 for unemployment against the national average in the United States. There was recently an article that talked about how there's such an issue with back rent among lower income families, and that there are people who are getting up into like $5,000, $8,000, even $12,000 of back rent, and they can't pay it. And the I think it's kind of disingenuous for an administration to tout some sort of financial victory when it's not just in Massachusetts, but it's across the United States. There's millions of families that they have this imaginary amount, and they're supposed to have this imaginary amount in their bank account when people just read the news and they're thinking, oh, things are good. But the fact of the matter is, you have millions of people and families at this tremendous disadvantage, and even if they do get their jobs back, it's not a guarantee of financial stability. So there's massive ripple effect, repercussion. These people, they could have been in debt already. Their net worths could have been below $8. It could have been negative. I mean, that's one of the main socioeconomic issues in Massachusetts, is that for a white family, the average net worth is over $200,000, and then for a black family, the average net worth is about $8. So when you factor those types of things in, and you factor in that black families, Latino families, Latinx families, or families of color are disproportionately affected by the pandemic, or the pandemic within the United States, and the factors within the United States, uh, that just makes me personally upset to hear that there's supposed to be some sort of great broad reaching financial victory that's being touted when it's just not the case.
Well, people like to stand behind the consumer confidence index, which is what I understand is that it's an expression or of how much people believe in buying stuff. But where's that money come from? It's the same people that are like, oh, if Biden raises taxes, I won't be able to afford my $60 Comcast bill, even though his tax increase would only affect money that people earn beyond $400,000. And I'm really kind of, it's hard for me to understand how somebody who's making 400,000 plus dollars a year can't afford $60 a month for internet.
I think that's the adult onset illiteracy there. Not being able to read the fine print of the policy that's being suggested or proposed. If a tax is supposed to only apply to a specific income bracket, then that's something that people should pay attention to instead of just seeing the word tax and then feeling personally attacked in some way, which shouldn't even be the case. They should see their benefit from it. The point of some of these tax proposals is to redistribute wealth in a form of essentially closing a wealth divide by giving people a greater chance at solidifying their income in the long term. But
Well,
again,
hold on. No, we can't make it about income because the problem is you have people who've had generations of labor stolen and then their generational wealth systematically stolen, and then any capacity to build systematic wealth stolen. So in the process, the income to those people is then disproportionate for the same work. So if a white person and a black person do the same work, a black person is going to get paid less the same way a woman's going to get paid less.
Yeah.
So then it's not even about, you can't be about income because the income's never going to get them on par either. So this is why when you have all of these things working in tandem to create the disparity where the average white family has $200,000 of money or of wealth just sitting around where the black family has $8, it's then framed as if it's because the black person didn't have the proper access to the proper job or the proper education to get the right, access to the right network. But it has nothing to do with that because it's always about race at the end of the day, because the black person can't get the mortgage. So even if they have a job, they can't get the home. So then they're paying twice as much rent to not own something. And then they end up throwing away half of their income to get a quarter of the living space and security as somebody who then gets a mortgage from a bank. That then okay, check it. If a white person can get a mortgage on 2 homes at the same time, they can sell one of those homes and constantly be doing that, whereas a black person can't get one mortgage. Then a white person can live comfortably flipping homes while a black person can never actually even own a home. And then white people will say, oh, it's because they couldn't get the proper income. Like, no, that has absolutely nothing to do with it. The problem is you have a system in which home ownership is gate kept by the bank system, which is gate kept by white men who work in the offices. So if you have a bunch of white men who are then deciding who get mortgages and where they get mortgages, that's how you get redlining, where black people end up in low income housing and apartment complexes that white people own, and the black people are working the complexes and they're effectively the vassals and they're getting paid minimum wage
What's
to then maintain.
what's that home improvement meme? It's like House Hunters episode. Oh yeah, I'm a freelance hamster trainer. I tune harmonicas part time. Our budget is $950,000.
That's because that's real. It's funny because it's real.
It's
White
sad.
people in America can like get okay, if you gain enough weight, you can get disability to pay your rent if you're white. But you can't get that if you're black, because then it's your fault for having the diabetes, and then you have to pay for your medical care.
Well, that's
care.
welfare, isn't it? I mean,
Exactly. It's what you get put on welfare if you're black, and then you get labeled a poor health risk, and the counterpart for a white person would be getting put on disability. You get a handicap sticker. You probably get enough in your disability payment where you could buy a vehicle to accommodate your big ass. Like
I sell used 8-track tapes and hang potatoes in people's garages. Our budget is $950,000.
I mean, again, it's like the way that the like you see the hoarders TV shows where you're like, where do these people get all the money for the fucking hoard? The government is giving it to these white people. They're basic. There's like a safety net that everybody else would call socialism that white people just take for granted because they know that the system is built for them when it exploits everybody else. So again, it's not about income. Like no
Yeah.
matter my income, I can't get a mortgage in a nice neighborhood. They're never going to give me a mortgage in a nice neighborhood. That's just not going to happen.
You're a
You make
highly educated person.
that's the
You have
that's
you have extremely high earning potential. Like what?
it doesn't
What?
matter.
I know. It's
And I'll never get a mortgage in a nice neighborhood. They'll give me a mortgage in low income housing. They will, but they won't give me a mortgage in a nice neighborhood.
so. If I
So
were to buy a house, I would actually. When I bought my home, I had to. I was told that I was asked, "Am I going to rent this out?" And I said no. And said, "Okay, good, because you'll have to wait 5 years before you can sell or you can start renting. Otherwise, there's a whole different tax bracket to it, to the whole thing." And I thought that was really interesting because 5 years seems like a lot of time for these house flippers to buy a house and then fix it and then flip it. That doesn't fit the whole narrative of flipping a house. So they've got to have even more money backing them to be able to facilitate this. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense.
They take out loans to do it, low interest loans
yep,
to supplement their income, and then they pay off the difference over time.
that's some shit black people can't do. Black people don't have access to that. It's not like we won't want to. You don't think I want to do that? I can't. I don't have access. I will
Yeah.
not be able to get any of those loans.
That's frustrating. That's incredibly frustrating.
No, it's like it, it's frustrating on many levels because then a lot of people on the left have no idea that this shit is even exists, and then they'll try to be like, "Oh, we just got to get black people the education," and then they turn it into this like latent racist bullshit where they think black people didn't want our way out of the situation, as if we couldn't figure our way out, and not to anticipate that the white supremacist infrastructure has created multiple
Yeah.
lines of systems to make sure black people aren't able to accumulate wealth. It's just white people don't grasp the depth of the systems that are put in place. It's not just black people, it's Native Americans. It's like um certain segments of Chinese people. It's not the rich Chinese people. It's the Chinese people that get exploited by other Chinese people. There's systems to make sure those people aren't able to accumulate wealth either. But and that's how like there's like systems to make sure Indian people can't accumulate wealth, but not like the rich Indians that are already rich in India. If there's rich families in India, they're already rich. They don't need to come here to get rich. The people that need to come here to get rich, they're kept in a system where they can't get rich. So they keep getting sold the dream. So they keep driving the fucking taxis and they keep fucking doing the shit that promises them the dream of becoming rich. So they're just basically becoming the servant class because otherwise, what you realize is without a servant class, rich people can't be wealthy. Like they don't feel wealthy around robots. They need actual human servants to make them feel wealthy. And this is the problem with the left. They do not grasp that the right wing is actually full of sadistic sociopaths who do not work on logic, who are not honest with their language, and have no honest intentions of ever working with them. And this is why when like we see the reach across the aisle bullshit, it's just so. I mean, it happens every single time, and then the right wing pretends they're going to do it and just undermines everything the left wing does, or the Democrats, because they're not the actual left.
Yeah, I know a lot of leftists
Too
who are
predictable.
super displeased and kind of displaced by the Democratic Party, who would probably say that they agree with you and they want to change that system. But I think that a lot of people who are in that position are also kind of without means to, or without the ability to affect change. It's hard
And
when
that's
the system is
design. That's
stacked.
by design. And
Yeah.
that's by design. That's why you got to get out of it to affect change, and then use that what you can do outside of it to then work back in it. And this is like what people do not understand. Barack Obama could not affect change because he tried to do it from within the fucking system. Everything he did got reversed. So now Joe Biden in 2020 has to go in, or 2021 when he takes office, has to go in and try to fix everything that was undone under Trump that Obama did because they didn't have the proper strategy or the long term thought or the realization that the right wing is a bunch of fucking Nazis that are not rational or logical. They will not accept that because then once you accept that you're fighting Nazis, you have to change your tactics and you can't be nice anymore. And that's the problem. They want to keep being nice because that's been their thing. They don't want to be hard ass Democrats that realize like, hey, we have social justice to do, but we also have a bunch of fucking Nazis to fight at the same time. Because then you can't act like, oh, we voted the Nazis way, motherfucker. These motherfuckers are still out driving with their shit on their car.
They put their flags on their trucks at half mast
Yeah,
for like a
so
day.
the vote doesn't get rid of Nazis. These are the motherfuckers black people been trying to tell y'all were there in the police force the whole time. Now people finally realize that half the police force is full of Nazis. And then it's like, because the left has spent so much time demonizing people, they can't discern the difference between the military and police force. And that becomes problematic because then when you do that same dumbass shit where you're like, oh, uh, this is the problem, I'm gonna fucking say all these people are a problem and equate like one thing with like two unequal things, then the left, the Democrats saying that the military is going to reinforce Trump's fucking illegitimate presidency if he decided to stay in. Well, you're just calling all the black people and all the minorities that the military leans on a bunch of fucking automaton robots that will not like do anything otherwise if they're given illegal bad orders. And then that's just, there's this level of detachment where the centrist Democrats are the ones that end up causing the most stagnance because then it's like the far leftists, like Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, is that are. I mean, I don't even know how far left she actually is. She's way farther left than anybody that that's like in politics that's a Democrat.
Yeah.
But people like her pull the election, uh, carry it for the left, and then they blame that type of rhetoric for any sort of negative implications, and then immediately try to reach across the aisle. Those people that try to reach across the aisle are the ones that keep holding the progress back. I cannot reiterate enough that those are the ones that end up holding us back. They are the fake Democrats that are there to subvert our movement and then make it seem like they're on our side. And they'll fucking wear blue and they'll come to the fucking uh speeches and they'll come to the rallies and they'll pretend that they're on our side. But then when it's time to make change, oh, are you sure this is the time to stop being antagonistic and reach across the aisle? We need to reach across the aisle. No, this is not the fucking time to reach across the aisle. Now, when I said Joe Biden needs to enact legislation that makes sure right wingers' lives get better, that means every American citizen should benefit from the legislation of a president. Like, you can't say it's going to be equal, but when you're a president and you're working to legislate with Congress, there shouldn't be people who are losing out from your legislation. Everybody should either gain something or not gain and not lose anything. There shouldn't be any people that are then losing. Like, organizations are not people. I don't care what the legislation says. That's bullshit. Regardless, the president is now, and that's his mantra, is what he's saying. That doesn't mean you should go out of your way to benefit right wing ideals. And he needs to understand. I mean, obviously, he's not listening to me, but this is where there's a difference between working to make sure all Americans' lives are not impacted negatively and working to try to benefit people who believe in some right wing ass shit. And that's where I'm like, there's there's a time to look at right wing ideals and say, oh, some of these things aren't terrible. Like, there's a point where we're like, oh, bring back, like, one of the biggest right wing ideals was bring back the military from abroad. I'm like, okay, that's actually a great one. I'm weirded out that the Democrats aren't more about this, but I can get on board with bringing back, like, so there's things where you can look at the right wing platform and pick out like one out of 100 things and be like, yeah, okay, this isn't bad. But then you look at the immigration, and then it's like, okay, we can't be negotiating with people who think it's okay to lock kids in cages and separate them from their parents. That's a non-starter. There's no negotiating with those people. So when we're talking about those people, we can't be reaching across the aisle to those specific people, and we need to parse out where the ones who were like Tea Party, kind of against government, but understand that there needs to be a semblance of cooperative order, because it's not just law and order, it's cooperative order. We have to all cooperate to keep the order, otherwise it's fascism. So this is where, when we're talking about people who understand cooperative order, that's about 3% of the Republican Party, if that. I'm being probably real generous.
That's like 1.5 senators.
Exactly.
One and a
About
half.
1.5 senators. That's probably about the amount that are worth discussing anything with, because that's probably the amount of Republican senators that will rationally discuss something. Otherwise, they're just going to be um, obstructionists. That's what they do. They don't try to work with. They pretend they're going to work, and then they do obstructionist shit. That's what they do. It's their MO. It's their modus operandi. That's what they do. They will never, ever, ever work with Democrats. And Democrats just need to acknowledge this shit. They need to do stuff that benefits everybody, but not actively Republicans. It's not that difficult. Because again, you can't be going against the Republican agenda either, because then that's like, oh, we can't be going out and saying, oh, we're going to make abortion legal past birth because the Republicans are against abortion. Like, no. That's not the type of thing that I mean, because it's like you have to protect the abortion rights and shit, but it's like there's times to like go into protecting transgender kids and shit like that. 2021 to 2024 is not the time to be talking about protecting trans kids. Trans adults, yes. But if the Democrats do shit like talk about protecting trans kids and, you know, trying to teach LGBTQ agendas in like elementary school and shit like that, they're just gonna set up another fucking Trump, is what they're gonna do. Because it's like, again, there has been a lot of progress in the LGBTQ agenda, like, not agenda,
Microcosm.
movement, in the sense of like what they're trying to do to make themselves first class citizens. Like they're fighting to be first class citizens. The issue becomes when you start extending those fights to children, the right wing distorts those fights. And the easiest way to deconstruct that is to not do those fights right now, specifically, because the issue is like every fucking time we all know there's transgender kids, we all know there's pansexual kids, we all know there's asexual kids. Like they need to be protected, but they don't need to be called out actively. And there's a point where calling them out actively then becomes ammunition for the right wing to distort it, because they're going to distort everything that the left wing does, everything that the Democrats do. The right wing is going to distort it and try to use it to attack them. So the easiest way to diffuse the right wing attacks is to pick and choose the things that the Democratic agenda goes after in a way that when they try to deconstruct it, it makes them look stupid. Like, we're trying to bring healthcare to every human in America. Then the right wing turns around, well, they're trying to bring healthcare to everybody in America. You see these socialists? They're trying to make sure that you can go to the hospital. They're trying to make sure that you can go to the doctor. And then the attack becomes stupid. You have to deconstruct the attack, so then it makes the person who then tries to use your words against you look stupid before they ever get a chance to do it, because you know they're going to do it. So you might as well, like, Democrats have been playing checkers. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, but the Republicans have been playing chess where the Democrats have been playing checkers, and it comes out looking like mouth breathing antagonism, because that is the front line. But the actual long-term strategy, god damn, the Republicans have just been beating the shit out of the Democrats in long-term strategy. That's why we keep drifting right. And every time it's because the Democrats start celebrating and the Republicans are already back fucking strategizing. It's just frustrating to see, like, people not learn from. Again, it's like I haven't even watched SNL yet. Like, I'm sure they went on and patted themselves on the back, and it's like, I'm sure it's funny, but SNL, come on, y'all fed it, y'all helped it out.
Yeah.
SNL is part of the problem. SNL needs to take responsibility for turning him into a joke and making everybody not taking him seriously. So then they had to come in and be part of what made him go away. Otherwise, if they never interjected themselves into that, they wouldn't have had to help solve it, because they were responsible, and they're not accepting responsibility for that. So that's where I'm like, man, all the people in Hollywood, especially, they got to do some real soul searching to be like, hey, if I'm going to be talking about something, maybe every time I talk about it, I bring an expert along with me. If I'm going to appear in public on an issue, I don't appear by myself. I bring an expert with me to not put shine on the expert, but to make sure I'm not a fucking celebrity talking about something I'm not an expert in. Unless you're Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about space, you probably shouldn't be talking about it if you're just a celebrity and it's not about being a celebrity. It's not that hard. And then I'm so glad Lil Wayne has torpedoed his own career. I'm so glad he has torpedoed his own career, because that dude was destroying black minds like it was nobody's business. Drink lean, drink lean. Yeah, you drank that, hit that the codeine. You fucking pharmaceutical ad, walk-in pharmaceutical ad. Now you go to his Twitter page, that motherfucker is just an advertisement. He is a walking advertisement. His brain is so fried, all he can do is take money and advertise for it. So I am so glad he came out in support of Voldemort before the election came out. So now anybody in the black community listening to Lil Wayne gonna have a fucking weird side eye at them. Everybody gonna be looking at them weird because he's associated with Trump forever, forever. His rap career, his anything. Wayne Brady has more fucking street cred than Lil Wayne right now.
Well, wasn't there was a whole period in the early 2000s where Trump was, you know, a fairly regular occurrence in commercial rap. They talked about him because they saw. I just remember that his name, his identity emerged quite a bit in commercial rap because he was, you know, synonymous with success and business prowess and making that money. And I think that there's a whole generation of commercial rap that, you know, was dangerous in that regard. It it put it built an ivory tower for somebody who didn't need one.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, it really promoted a kind of, you know, toxic capitalism, consumerism, self-consuming consumerism that I'm, you know, I don't care what people spend their money on. You know, if you like badass hoodies and dope shoes, then get your gear. That's fine. But we've ended up with a consumer culture that's so driven by keeping up with Joneses that they don't even know.
Well, have you seen I'm Gonna Get You Sucker?
Yes,
So that movie is obviously
that's an old movie at this
era.
point.
It's like an old era piece from late eight. I guess it was mid '80s. Um,
It
but
was 1988.
the the subject matter is so on point because they are calling out a transition that was happening in the industry, which was it was established by this point, but it was changing. So um, the music industry had been long well established by this point, and the issue was rap music had emerged as this uncontrollable force as a genre, but when the industry tried to tame it, they put out certain images as what they were trying to do. So at first it was like real um
The
dance, and then it moved to like more conscious. So the first waves of rap music were mostly about conscious stuff,
yeah,
and this is where you get the like boogie down production, KRS-One, Grandmaster Flash, like even like to a certain degree, Run DMC isn't really conscious, but it's not destructive. So it's like the borderline between disco party rap and conscious. It's like right on the border. So this is where again, Rakim, Eric B and Rakim start to there's all this stuff that starts to emerge, but then the industry takes a grasp on it and completely derails it when Public Enemy, it was like Public Enemy and Ice T came out with controversial records. And once those records were so shown to have so much influence in the black community, the industry was like, okay, we need to take a hard left. And from that point, um, the Tupac that was like Tupacalypse Now became the gangster rap that was Death Row, and the Death Rows emerged, and it was like the industry put money into deconstructing the conscious movement that had emerged. So there's not even a question about this. There was active capital put into deconstructing the conscious movement that emerged in black communities and music. So this is like it's well-known history now to the point that when the black community was discussing it, then they labeled it Illuminati because that's the only thing that you could really do is like you know, obviously the Illuminati as a concept emerged before that, but what black people were trying to explain was that there are active forces trying to deconstruct the ties and the minds in the community. And nobody would fucking believe it because it was not the records weren't there. Now the records are out there. We know Too Short was getting paid to call women bitches and hoes and talk about pimping and prostitutes and not be conscious when he was trying to be conscious, but he just took the fucking money because he was pimping the black community, is what it came down to. And that's when you hear the Kendrick Lamars use the metaphor to pimp a butterfly as a framing for what rap was for the black community, in that it became our means to tell stories, but it also became a means for people to pimp their way out of the system that had put them there, in the process just becoming another part of it, reinforcing it. So you never get out of it, you just become another part of it. And this is the problem with people who don't then understand that you have to get out of the patriarchy to deconstruct the patriarchy. You
What a
can't be
that's a such a
patriarchy.
that's a such a heavy version of hippies spending their youth sticking it to the man only to grow up and become the man.
Yep, they pimped their revolution. The hippies did it. The fucking
You
black
know,
rappers in the '80s did it.
when you
In the
mentioned
90s.
I'm gonna get you sucker, I looked it up because I haven't read the synopsis in a while, and I completely forgot that the main character's name is Jack Spade, and his brother died from a gold chain overdose. And the movie
Over
is
gold.
yeah, oh he
Over golded.
over golden, and the white crime leader is the chain lord is called Mr. Big. They
So,
weren't even masking it. They were like up front with it all.
No, in that movie they have like the Hood Olympics where it's like they're like competing to, you know, take rims off cars, and there's like a TV carrying contest, how far you can carry or how fast and far you can carry the TV, and instead of sprints. And it's like it's lampooning all of the tropes about black people that the media puts out to then flip them on their head to say, like, obviously these things aren't accurate. This is so absurd. This is what y'all think black people are doing in the hood, like competing each other to take rims off cars. This is how stupid it looks when we like show you. That's why I'm gonna get you suckers so genius, in that there's a fine line in black exploitation between being self-aware and just mocking and exploiting, which is obviously why that term black exploitation like exists. But I'm gonna get you sucker is very well done for, like, because then there's also Hollywood Shuffle that Keenan Ivory Wayans and Robert Townsend did. Keenan Ivory Wayans and Robert Townsend are fucking genius writers, and for the black community, they've done a lot to deconstruct um, the black criminal in the white person's mind by putting out these comedic representations of them. Because then, like, I don't know if you seen Hollywood Shuffle. So Hollywood Shuffle is basically about this black nerd who's trying to get an acting gig, and all Hollywood will try to put him in is like gangster roles. And it's like it shows him going from like his family life to then what Hollywood tries to do with him. And it's so far ahead of its time in that it's obviously a low budget film, but the way that they're also showing how Hollywood shows black people, they wouldn't have been able to do it if they would have waited for Hollywood to fund it. So they went ahead and understood that
A
as
hundred
black,
thousand dollars. That was the budget.
yeah, I figured it was something stupid low. Yeah. So oh my god, the fact that they made that movie on $100,000, that movie is fucking classic. For like, if Kevin Smith gets accolades for Clerks,
What he had like a $20,000 budget or something like that. $28,000 for
Oh,
Clerks.
maybe I don't know. Regardless, Hollywood Shuffle is a far superior film to Clerks.
Uh,
Like especially for the time period that it
no,
was made.
Clerks budget was $27,000, but they had a $230,000 post production budget.
Yeah, so nah, Hollywood Shuffle is a way superior film to Clerks. Way superior.
Clerks 2 had
It
a
holds.
$5 million budget.
I don't know if Clerks would hold up today.
Dogma had a $10
Like
million budget. Jane Silent Bob Strike Back had a $22 million budget.
Kevin Smith is the most overrated, underperforming director of all time, in my opinion. I used to be a fan of his when I was like a child, but then I grew up and my like understanding of film got better. Um, and he really half-assed the first part of his career and got propelled to fame by other average ass white dudes who want to like imagine themselves to be Kevin Smith to like also half-ass their way to fame. And he'll like openly acknowledge it in that obviously he works hard to make these movies, but as far as like he's not a good director. He's a good writer. He
Yeah.
writes. He's a really good dialogue writer. He's a horrible director. As far as like cinematography, he's a horrible cinematographer, and he'll acknowledge this. Anybody who knows anything about film knows this, but his fans are so up his ass that they like reinforce this notion that he's good when you look at his film history, his budgets compared to what he did, it's just not great. Like Dogma is a great film because of the writing and because of the actors and actresses in it. The cinematography, it's okay. It's not fantastic.
Yeah.
It could have been way better. For the subject matter, it was very like when you think about the fact that we're discussing and analyzing biblical deity level and demigod level figures, the cinematography is really low quality, really low. So I mean, just keeping it real, like you look at
there was a
Mandalorian has better cinematography than any Kevin Smith film.
Yeah, well, Mandalorian is Star Wars. It's the future of Star Wars. That whole episodic storytelling is the future. There's a. I'm glad you mentioned deity demigod level cinematography. There was a action horror thriller movie made in 2010 called Legion, and it was a pretty terrible story, but visually it was actually very well done. Like the visualization, the kind of fear that they were able to pack into then state of the art CGI and visualization of angels battling was actually really good. They present this world of 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 plagues coming in and people fighting for their lives, and it's actually really, they did a good job. Story sucked, but they portray angels as powerful beings. They portray demons as something not to mess with because they'll fuck you up. And they in Dogma they kind of do that, but it's also tongue in cheek. That by the time that you see Matt Damon with his wings cut off and drunk and stumbling around being an idiot, he's not that
The angels are a
imposing.
joke.
Yeah, it's a
They're
joke.
not like something that's like a cosmic level war.
Yeah.
It's a joke. And that's where I mean, like, I'm starting to realize there's cosmic level battles, and there's earth level and there's street level. And um it's really hard to do cosmic level battles well. Constantine, the film, did it really well ahead of its time. And what I'm realizing is people were not ready for cosmic level battles like early. Um, so then you look at like the Green Lantern extended cut. It's actually a really good cosmic level film.
Yeah.
It's really good for a cosmic level film, but people weren't ready for it. They just weren't
I,
ready for cosmic level yet.
I think that Ryan Reynolds was not the right person to cast as the Green Lantern.
Oh, I mean, the Hal Jordan one, I think he's fine. Like
Yeah, but
that's where the John Stewart one
John
is like
Stewart
the
is a much more serious Lantern.
yeah.
He
You do
reflects the universe that the Lanterns are tasked with protecting, much in a much more serious tone that makes me believe that
yeah.
the baddies that they're going after are actually a threat.
The Hal Jordan is kind of a fuck up, so that's where I was okay with because then knowing that there's the potential to do like a John Stewart type that's not or a Kyle Renner or they're Jessica Cruz. Like they're I think the one that they're gonna do on the TV show isn't even they're gonna do a brand new one
Yeah.
that's not even in the comics. So knowing that, then that's where I go back and I'm like, okay, this lantern makes sense in a cosmic setting, but we weren't there yet. And that's where again I think that there's this like you can't just go into cosmic level shit.
So Kyle Renner is a really interesting lantern because he's a comic book artist, um, and I thought that was really an incredible addition to the lanterns because his imagination was so incredible. And if memory serves me, the Sinestro gave the yellow ring to a schizophrenic person for that story arc, and that made for some of the most incredible lantern fights because you got somebody who's just creative beyond creativity, and then he's dealing with somebody who's crazy beyond crazy. That was a really interesting Lantern Saga. That's something that's like
What
bigger than a single movie, though.
And I think that's also why the Hal Jordan one actually becomes more compelling because his lack of creativity was one of his biggest hurdles to becoming a great lantern.
Yeah,
Even though he had great will, he was not very creative at first, and that was like I thought they did that pretty well.
yeah. Well, he was the
In
man
the
without fear. That was the whole Hal Jordan thing. The man without
yeah
fear. He's
yeah.
truly fearless. He would go headfirst into anything and figure out a way to succeed. I always liked the Green Lantern, like as a character, because when it came down to it, even though he had the potential to do, I mean, the strongest Lantern that I can imagine is probably Kal El, but even when we're just talking about normal lanterns, um, he has to turn to his team every so often because it's bigger than the solution is bigger than one person. Sometimes it takes two. Sometimes it takes five. Sometimes it takes the entire Lantern Corps to solve a problem. And so, in some ways, it's like a pro-military story microcosm. But in a lot of ways, it's a socialist story microcosm because you've gotta find help with your homies.
Well, but that's how Sinestro ends up becoming fascist. It is a very
Yeah,
militaristic and fascist force if you really look at it. So that's kind of where um, I think we have sort of looked at these characters and their place with more scrutiny in the recent decades. So it's not like as clear cut that
yeah.
it's okay for the Lantern Corps to have a unilateral um, mandate to defend the galaxy or whatever they believe to be the proper state of it. Or the omniverse now. The DC has graduated to the omniverse. I don't know if how long it's been that, but it's beyond the multiverse now. It's the omniverse. Um, I saw it in the recent death metal series. Like I don't know how long that's been there. That's the first I've thought of that word before, like in other contexts. Like I've seen it in other places, but DC has officially made their omniverse canon now, so it's bigger than the multiverse.
Yeah, That makes sense. That's really the only way to contain Doctor Manhattan.
And that's kind of what they're playing. I mean, not just him, but that's one of the elements. Is like it's been the fold outside of that layer the entire time. Because yeah, they're definitely, and this is why I think it's interesting to then think about like a lot of these cosmic level comic book stories wouldn't really work on big screen yet, like or the small screen for that matter. We're just not there. Like the death metal series, woo, they would not be able to do that shit justice even remotely close right now. And that's why I love being a comic book fan to then realize like, yeah, there's places that comic book um storytellers can go that other mediums can't.
Yeah, that's. You know, I imagine that one above all is, or even the one below all, those will become more prominent characters in that kind of framework, where you realize that there are entities or beings that can just walk through the barriers between the individual universe or megaverse or whichever universe a character embodied or is involved in. We'll end up seeing a new version of storytelling, like beyond time travel. I almost feel like Avengers has killed time travel. I mean, maybe they've made.
Well, they killed perfect time loop stories
Yeah,
is what they killed. You can't do perfect time loop stories anymore. That shit is just
there's no more time
old,
paradox.
it's tired, and it makes the story pointless, and everybody knows that now.
Yeah,
So it's like you might as well not tell the story if it's a perfect time loop story.
What about the Justice League Dark Flashpoint Paradox uh, dovetail?
It's not a perfect time loop story because Flash kept going. So the story there was a closed loop that he closed off, but he kept going. So the actual storyline is still going because they did this similar, like the Flashpoint paradox is in the comics originally. The issue is like what happens when you he basically tries to reset the timeline, and then in doing so running backwards to a certain point and changing something and then going back, he changes a lot of other things, and then that's what they explore during the Flashpoint storylines in on all the different mediums. But it's like what they also allude to is then when he comes out of the whole Flashpoint um, time loop, it's a new timeline, but he has to then settle with the new timeline and adjust to the new changes because he can't do it again. Otherwise, he risks changing. Like every time he does it, something more dramatic changes.
yeah. That's
Like
that's actually something they address in the Star Trek universe when they explore temporal operatives. They're trying to maintain the continuity of the time stream, but every time they change something, something else changes. And there are episodes where they try to maintain the stability of the time stream, but by the end of the episode, they've introduced all these changes that are, you know, obviously they happen in the future, and because temporal incursions happen in the past, and they're trying to preserve their timeline that they exist in. But then once we get to the most recent batch of Star Trek movies, Kelvin timeline exists in parallel to the Prime timeline. There's no going back. There's no merging of the timelines. Now there are two distinct Star Trek story universes that can happen concurrently. So Kelvin doesn't
you
obliterate.
happen
It doesn't
right.
obliterate the original series. It doesn't have to change. It doesn't have to undo anything that we enjoyed about the Next Generation or DS9 or Voyager. Now there's this entire new blank slate that can be explored, and as a storytelling mechanism, that's actually really powerful because it gives us this option of reusing characters that we know or are familiar with and put them in a setting that we're familiar with, but it also gives us the opportunity to I mean, in a Kelvin timeline, Riker might be a woman. In the Kelvin timeline, uh, Data might never actually come online. In the Kelvin timeline, um, Picard have a might never have to have an artificial heart.
But since didn't Spock like cross over?
Yeah, prime timeline Spock warned Kelvin Spock of the future
So what ends up happening is that timeline becomes part of their
history.
history. Exactly. That's why it exists in their history, but then it changes the path potential for that future, which is why it becomes this weird thing of like when you have become used to single line, single plane storylines, multi-plane timelines become difficult to process in that you want to focus on one as being more important when in reality your window of perspective is what is actually determining
Yeah,
where you're looking and what is important rather than one being more important than the other. They exist equally in space time.
like the
Rel-
only characters in Star Trek that would be able to really observe the differences would be the Q and Guinan's species.
yeah,
A-
exactly.
And they're the only ones who get to be like, wait a second, what's going on here? And of course, Q would be like, this isn't how it's supposed to be. I'm gonna go confront Picard now.
And but they even actually address that in Discovery.
Yeah, they
So
do.
and
No,
this is where again, like Discovery is like reconciling all of this,
yeah,
which is even more intelligent of them to lay the foundation for this in a timeline that does not actually involve the either of those stories. Well, technically, no, Spock's in that story too. Now that I
yeah.
think about
But he's a different
it. Yeah,
Spock.
right.
And
I mean, technically,
well,
because the whole issue is we've just now found out about Michael Burnham.
yeah,
They have to just create a good enough reason why we never found out about Michael Burnham in that timeline, and they already connected it because they put Pike. They put the original series episode with Pike in the Discovery episode,
yep,
so it's canon.
yeah. No, I really like what they've done. Spock has more depth. Spock has so much more depth that now what are they? What's the Pike Star Trek called? It's man, why can't I find the freaking name for it? Oh, Strange New Worlds. I'm looking forward to this because the two episodes of the original series where they explore Pike, the first episode, the pilot, he's actually the archetype for the captain of the Enterprise. And I liked in Kelvin Star Trek how he's the captain of the Enterprise, and it kind of sucked when they killed him, but that's part of the story. But I really enjoyed everything that he was a part of in Discovery because it explained it provided a little bit of explanation as to like who this person is, but at the same time I also felt like I didn't know this captain at all, and I got to meet the captain of the Enterprise again for the first time, and that was a good experience because we all have expectations of the captain of the Enterprise, but he's like the actual first one, and I'm not going to accept that Scott Bakula crap. That's not that's just bullshit.
Well, and they made Pike a badass, a compassionate badass on
Yeah,
Discovery, and that's kind of where I think it's important that they get those qualities in what they're trying to represent because this is also why Lorca makes a good villain.
yeah,
Um, because then he has those qualities, but then you try to like determine if he's just faking them to get to
want to go home and kill the Emperor.
right or to what's it called, like to drop people's guards. If
Mm.
it's like if that character really the character is so well written as a villain, you want to then believe he has a higher motive that made him
Well,
like do
they
the unethical
you want
things.
to believe that he's actually a good guy despite being a Terran.
Exactly. That's when you know you have a well written villain.
Oh man, when they dropped the mirror universe bomb in Discovery, and it's like, oh, why didn't I see it? He's got all the telltale signs. And that's when I realized how good the foreshadowing had actually been, because it was like right there. It was right I was at the door. The door was opened, and as soon as my eyes adjusted to the light, it's one of those moments where it's like they've been building up to this the entire time.
Yep.
Good job, CBS. Just way to go. I'm super impressed with the quality of cinematography and digital effects, computer generated imagery in the Star Trek that we've been given. It's every bit as competent as you know the Kelvin movies.
Well, and then I think a lot of people complained about J.J. Abrams' style of
Oh,
cinematography.
the lens flares.
Yeah, and you know what's crazy is like obviously you can go overboard with the lens flares and shit, but when you get that level of film looking quality in an episode and it hits the same beats as a normal Star Trek show, but it also hits the same beats as a film in a condensed period. It's like I don't know what anybody could complain about at that point. It's like the best of all the worlds, and this is
Yeah,
where,
and we get to go back to episodic Star Trek.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
don't know. It's like this is the best timeline for Star Trek. Like we're getting our best Star Trek story lives
We really
right now.
are. And then we get lower decks to round it all up and
Yep.
soften the edges and make it funny. We can be serious with Discovery, and we can explore strange new worlds with Pike, and we can have a few laughs with the lower deck crew. Because despite being, you know, the butt of the joke, they were good enough to get into Star Trek or into the Federation. They
Hmm.
graduated from the Academy. I think you mentioned it last week that not everyone gets into the Academy, and not everyone who gets into the Academy graduates.
Hmm. Yeah, it's very easy to forget because we only focus on so few of them. But it's like, no, there's still billions of people on Earth.
So, according
Billions.
to like Stack Exchange and Memory Alpha, they estimate roughly 4.2 billions on Earth in the 24th century in the Star Trek universe, and let's see, um, total population Starfleet, 395 million members. That's let's see, 0.004%, 0.001%. like like what is it? A thousandth of the population can qualify for being a part of Starfleet. I think that's a high number, especially once we start thinking about everyone who is like
Well, but Starfleet includes like all the population.
no, that's what I mean. Like the entire
Yeah,
population of Starfleet is 400 million, and there are 4 billion humans on Earth. That's
but I mean, like the Academy, like gets like
people from
everybody from the Alpha Quadrant.
yeah, and
It's not just
and the
humans.
Beta Quadrant now.
Oh shit.
So there are even fewer humans in Starfleet than we ever were led to believe. That means it's even harder to get onto a starship in Star Trek. So even the lower decks fuck ups are actually really intelligent. They're really capable humans, and some of them are cyborgs, and some of them are aliens, but or humanoid non-Earthlings. But still, that they're like the best of the best of the best. I think that the problem with I think that the problem that people may have had with Discovery is that the characters we got to see them being human. We got to see them make mistakes, and the audience, of course, always knows what's right and what's best, and say, well, they shouldn't have done that. Why did they do that? But as the audience, we can never fully appreciate the in the moment context of the story. We're always the observer, the observer effect on Star Trek. Well, that was wrong. Why did they write that? That's not how it happens.
uh, yeah, no, I mean, I thought the way that they're writing the Klingons on this is really good too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, the Klingons are great now. They're fantastic. They're nothing like what we've seen before. The Klingons that we've gotten in Next Generation and beyond are so like pacified. They're politicians. And the warriors are like considered to be kind of crazy. And in Discovery, the Klingons are like everything that the mythology, the mythos would have us believe. And they're still really fucking intelligent because they've got warp technology. Holy shit!
Mm-hmm.
We haven't seen any Klingons in Discovery after the burn yet.
Oh yeah,
Mm,
no, you're
that's
right.
true.
Well, I guess I haven't even caught up yet. I'm still a few episodes behind.
Yeah, I'm only on episode 1 of season 3. But even that, like that starts a whole new universe of story. That's just like, wait a second, how did we get here? I mean, I realized they jumped 990 something years into the future, but there's a let's see, there's a 400-year gap between the temporal operatives of the existing Star Trek universe that operated from the 29th century and when Discovery lands in the 33rd century, 34th century, whatever it is. Like there's a big gap of time where all things can happen, and they haven't provided any information about that. And that's the part that makes me want to know more. That makes me want to understand really like how. You know,
I just appreciate the sheer emotional depth that Discovery brings.
mm,
I feel like a lot of the other Star Trek series bring a lot of logical and philosophical depth. They the emotional depth in Discovery seems to really far exceed some of the emotional depth that we've seen outside of the films.
yeah,
I think that might also have to do with the timing. Having a more emotionally deep writer set and audience, for that matter, because I mean, you look at some of the stories in the '90s, even, and homophobia was still pretty prevalent, and it still seeps through in some of the Star Trek episodes where you end up having a lot of the villains be um, homosexual or switch genders, like not obviously through surgery necessarily, but it'll be like, oh, they take over the opposite
oh
body
my god,
sex. And,
it just occurred to me that 7 of 9 is autistic.
I mean, basically,
Holy shit! It just no, I mean, but it just occurred to me that she is autistic in Voyager, and it's not until Picard that we see a version of Seven who is able to
yeah.
fully function in society.
Hmm.
and then that in that moment when she has to reactivate the cube and don the mantle of the queen of the cube, like that moment you can see it, like she screams. It's like not a fun experience to be reintegrated like that. Actually, so I've been watching Voyager passively as I do homework, and the Seven of Nine stories are my favorites right now, and because of the way that they tackle like the logic of Spock that's already present with the Tuvok character, but then they add this element of how do I fit in? Everyone looks at me weird. I don't understand social cues. Like, what did I say? What I said was right. It's like
Well, and it's frustrating though, because like, yeah, all those things are definitely present, but they like that was Kess, and then they switched it to Seven, and it was like they basically the way it happened was as the woman who played Kess like started getting older and her metabolism started slowing down and she started gaining more weight.
yep,
Like they replaced her. So it's like on the one hand, the story is yes, it's compelling, and that they did it with a woman character is like great, but the way that they did it, like doing the same story approach that they did with it's like the exact same thing with Kess, because Kess had to like learn how to she was like
yeah. 'Cause she was a child. She was like
or
3 or
yeah,
4 years old.
yeah. So
The thing that I noticed about the Kess character is that they underutilized her. They
mhm,
completely underutilized everything that character had the potential for that character. And with Voyager, they overutilized an underdeveloped character with Seven of Nine. Seven of Nine is completely overutilized. She's like the walking computer that can do all the things that they don't have time to figure out how to do with their tricorders, but she can do it on a
yeah.
tricorder in like a few seconds. But they don't really allow her to develop her own innate potential quite as much as the other characters. The other characters, I feel like they're running it like, 70, 80, 90% potential, and she outpaces them at like 30% potential. And Kess, I mean, she became a trans-dimensional being. So,
Hmm.
like, she achieved her potential, and then that wrote her off the show. But they only got her to really tap into that in like the last episode that she appears in that I've seen. I'm pretty sure she comes back like later in the show for a couple episodes. It's been a while since I watched Voyager, and I have to admit that I didn't really watch it when it was on the air because I was
You can't get into something once it starts like when there was no internet to go watch the beginning episodes. You can't
yeah.
just jump into season 3 of Voyager.
No, you can't. It's not episodic in the way that TNG or the original series was, or the way that
I
Lower Decks is.
realize, yeah, like that's why I didn't get into it when it was on either, because it's like you just can't jump in.
Yeah. It, I must have lucked out when Deep Space Nine happened because I enjoyed that the first time it aired, and I enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it every time I watch it, but I realize now that it's like a super space opera.
Hmm.
I mean, it's like a epic galactic or not galactic galactic quadrant space opera, and so is Voyager, but Voyager is much more contained.
Yeah, because I mean, with Deep Space Nine, a lot of it is like the calm before the storm episodes where nothing's actually happening. So it's just like fucking Odo checking out the promenade and
Getting mad at Quark.
Jake, yeah, Jake and fucking
Nog.
Nog running around getting in trouble. And it's like, yeah. And then fucking Cardassians attack the station like 3 episodes later, or some shit. And it's like,
And then we find
so,
out that the Cardassians aren't even like the worst of the bad guys. They're just like
right. Yeah.
they're just annoying and full of themselves. But really, when it comes down to it, like there are much worse things than the freaking Cardassians.
Hmm.
and even they realize that after they're infiltrated, and like Gul Dukat's like, they fucked me, those bastards, I'm gonna kill them, and then he goes crazy and becomes like a demon.
Oh yeah,
He gets
I
possessed
mean,
by one of the ancients or whatever.
Bajoran ancients. Yeah.
uh, in Discovery, we see uh, forces that are more threatening than the Cardassians. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
in the finale of what was it, the first or it was the second
second,
season?
yeah, it's the
Control.
control, the AI from the
Yeah.
twenty
Yeah.
seventh century or
Like,
whatever.
that's basically, game over if that wins for like everything.
Yeah, that's why they had to send the discovery and the data into far into the future where
The
control
sphere
didn't
data.
know to
Yeah.
nor to exist. Yeah, man, everything about Discovery makes me want to watch more. Like, to think that the Star Trek universe is so small that it's only about the Enterprise or it's only about Deep Space Nine or Voyager is like such a huge limiting factor. Like, why would anybody put
Mhm.
shackles on that story universe like that? It's the same thing with Star Wars. Like, I'm tired of Skywalker stories. I don't care about that family anymore. But I really enjoyed Solo because Han Solo. I've always liked Han Solo. I've always liked Chewbacca. And when I watched Rebel One again, I realized that's aside from the brief moments where Vader shows up to assert dominance, it's not a Skywalker story at all. It's like it's has virtually nothing to do with that family, and I enjoyed it more because of that. And that's what I enjoy about Mandalorian is like there's whatever they've got the child, and he's clearly a same species as Yoda, but there's no Skywalker, there's no Vader, there's no princess, there's none of that.
Yeah.
I like that about that. I hope that we get more. I know that they're gonna make an Obi
They
Wan
brought Boba
series.
Fett back.
That's true, but
Well, we don't know which one though, so we don't know. Like they
yeah.
say, Boba Fett.
Well, they're on Tatooine, so there's a good bet that it's the Boba Fett that got consumed by the Sarlacc and somehow escaped and got rid of his armor. we can
Yeah.
we can make we can make some assumptions, and I'm willing to be wrong. I might be very wrong, and it might be a different clone of Django, but it'll definitely be interesting to see how they
That's what
work
I was
that out.
wondering. If it was another clone of Django.
There have to have been more of them that survived. I mean, they made a was the cartoon Rebels. They explore several of the clones that all survived the order to kill the Jedi, and one of them eventually joins the rebellion, and they retcon that he is one of the characters who helped take the shield station on Endor. So there's this whole world of clones out there that were too far away to get the signal. They've got to be alive still.
Hmm.
They're getting old, but
The technology was transferred to another civilization or to another organization or a group of people, and the clones were kept for a different purpose.
well, in what is it? Star Wars Rebels, they explored the destruction of the Kaminoan cloning facility that produced all of the Django clones. But they don't. I mean, you're right. They don't explore the opportunity, countless opportunities. We're talking about like an intragalactic spacefaring society that has a planet dedicated to cloning an army. That surely they have another planet with a cloning facility.
Yeah, it's got to be it. If you're gonna make one, you got to make a second one,
Yeah, I
right?
mean that's the Death Star rule.
Why not a third?
Yeah, I mean,
Why not Zoidberg?
why not Zoidberg? No, that's it. I mean, they after the second Death Star was destroyed, they started building that Death Moon from episode whatever 7. Yeah, episode 7. They built a death moon, an actual moon, and it could destroy multiple planets at the same time. So there's definitely a second cloning facility, a second Kaminoan cloning facility, a second droid production facility. There's probably a group of planets way out in the middle of some expanse that is churning out Death Stars. We just don't know about it.
Or the plans to the Death Stars were lifted, right, through espionage. Why couldn't the plans to a cloning facility be lifted by somebody and
Yeah,
sold to the highest bidder?
yeah.
I just want to see where they're getting all of the fucking material for the Death Star and like the shipping lanes for the alloy and
Oh, I
the,
bet, I bet, I bet it's like a giant strip mine. Like they find a suitable planet and they just turn that into the Death Star.
I mean, I want to see it. I want to like.
Yeah.
I'm actually interested in that process.
No,
Like,
I hear
Supply
you.
chain.
The supply
yeah,
chain behind the Death
Death Star.
Star.
You obviously have the fucking stormtroopers that are manning it. Who's building it? Like, it's not the same stormtroopers that are manning it, right? Because I
No, that's
mean, maybe
way too Star Trekky.
like revolted.
Engineers, space welders.
Space welders. Droids. They're using a lot of automated systems to fabricate the Death Star. They got giant 3D printing robots. They just spit out sections of the thing slowly and then run electricity through it to solidify.
Turns out the fucking Empire got voted in because of the jobs program.
Well, that's why the Republic never built anything bigger than a capital ship, is because
Right.
because of unions, right?
Work mining an asteroid.
Yeah, they had to pay people, but the Empire has it right. You know, they got those droids. You don't have to pay. You have to pay the company that builds the droids, and the total cost of training or construction of the droid itself is probably like 1/10 the lifetime investment versus having a person do it. So yeah, they'll just send one of their they'll send like a giant clamshell looking ship and it goes and chomps its mouth down around some planet and slowly as it consumes it spits out or it starts to inflate a small orb that turns into a Death Star at the back end out of its exhaust port.
It's I've always found it interesting how many people don't see the political messages in Star Wars and shit. Like,
Oh man, it's like a huge cautionary tale about neoliberalism and neo-feudalism. I mean, they call themselves the Empire.
yeah, there's a literal patriarchy.
Yeah. The Senate was just it was just an admission that they needed to let people have a voice of some kind, whether or not that voice meant anything or not. And the weirdest part, of course, is that the rebellion is framed as like the good guys, but in the first in the first trilogy, trilogy two, episodes 1 through 3, the rebellion is like states that were in opposition to the goals of the Senate. They were the Confederacy,
Mm.
and so it's this really weird mixed message. Like, wait, are the Confederates the good guys or the bad guys? The Confederates turn into the rebellion because they oppose the Empire, but the Empire also is the foundation of the rebellion because all of that technology, all of their ships come from the Republic, which becomes the Empire. I mean, their ships looked
Well,
like
because
star destroyers.
they wanted to replace everybody with clones, right? That's the
Yeah,
whole Attack of the Clones thing.
and that was a Republic initiative to create the clone
Yeah.
army. So the Republic became the Empire. The Republic just was consumed by fascism. not just, but
Yep.
it was consumed by
Over
fashion.
time.
Yeah, and then the tools that the Republic created became the man. It's just like bravo GL for coming up with that kind of stuff and allowing people to run with it and create a complex story universe that allows these things to happen. But man, it was over the head of everyone.
Hmm.
It's because he forced us to pay attention to the freaking Skywalkers the whole damn time.
And then there were the remastered, dated CGI versions that we have now.
Yeah, they Han shot first. Just saying, he shot Greedo. Greedo pulled his trigger because he got shot. Han shoots first, and then they clarify this in the solo when like his homie is trying to talk him into a place where he can shoot solo. Han just shoots him. He's like, "No, man, you've been talking too much." That's who Han Solo is. We know this now. It's canonized. Man, they just totally just launched it. They lobbed it over everyone's heads.
Mhm.
Bastards. I wonder. I wonder if Stargate was allowed to continue, if they would have ended up in a similar place.
Was there time travel in Stargate?
Yeah. Oh yeah. They explore it in SG-1. They explore it in Atlantis. Um, Stargate Universe might as well be a time travel story because they travel to a different galaxy. Um, I think
Yeah, universe is weird. It has so much potential.
yeah, they had the wrong crew. They had the wrong
Hmm.
crew and they had the wrong by
I'm trying to
wrong
think.
crew I
As an,
mean the actors were not.
yeah,
Well, they could bring it back if they really wanted, right?
No, they're the last we saw um one of the computer nerd Eli, it, he sacrifices himself to stay out of stasis long enough to try and fix the last stasis pod because everyone has to go into stasis so the ship can drift between galaxies, and it's going to take who knows how long, 1,000 years. And there are a few comic books that explore the brief period of time after everyone goes into stasis, but I stopped following that storyline because it just didn't have anywhere else to go. It's like, oh, so at some point the next episode is going to be everyone wakes up. Eli is 20 years older than everyone else, but he managed to fix the stasis pod before he ran out of rations, and now they're like going to have a desperate. They're on a desperate mission to find food and water in a foreign galaxy with, you know, Stargate level technology that they don't really have working properly. They haven't passed by a sun to or a star to get fuel in a millennia, and it doesn't go anywhere. They wrote themselves into a very bad place developmentally.
What about aliens?
They got their ass kicked by aliens at every turn. So I don't know. Speaking
I'm
of,
excited for the actual Alien franchise in the movie
yeah, oh yeah. I just hope
when
we
they
get it.
finally release that shit.
Yeah, I think
I think
Space
it's
Marine.
yeah, I think it's due next year, right?
Yeah, I think so. If everything goes on, as everything is on track, then it should.
Yeah,
Um,
October 2021. Yeah,
yep, October 15, 2021. Um, what are they calling it? Awakening? I don't know what they're calling it. Oh, Alien, yeah, Alien Awakening. No, that was canceled. Oh, good. That's just not the name for it anymore. Yeah, I want to see more about the engineers. I want to know more
yeah. I
about
think
the
that's
engineers.
That's what it's supposed to be mostly focused on. Like I get from what I heard in the most recent releases, like it's gonna focus on the engineers chasing David after he fucked up their um,
Colony.
colony, like, and then explain the space jockey in the process. So that's kind of where I think the film was supposed to end up at LV 224
Oh yeah, that'll be
at
good.
the end.
That'll be really good. Then it finishes it closes up that whole story gap in the story,
Hmm.
and then it gives us an opportunity to you know, move things forward.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Once they close that, I'd be very interested to see where they go forward from it.
I hope that they finally acknowledge that Ripley's a clone. Like she's always been a clone,
Yeah.
and I think that way they can.
Yeah. Or I guess there was an original, but they never really made it clear if the original was a clone. Yeah, you're right. Like it seemed implied, but because it what was it in the third one? They talked about the records or something. I think is either third or fourth.
Uh, well, the fourth one is Resurrection, and that's like
Oh yeah,
okay.
yeah,
So Resurrection's a comedy.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
straight up a comedy. Like it's
yeah.
funny. There are parts of it that have me just kind of snickering to myself because it's just
Real
funny.
bad, real
It
bad.
was terrible, but it was funny.
But yeah, because yeah, the resurrection was the one I think where they talked about the lineage of the clones. And
It'll be interesting. I think we've got a good there are a bunch of good opportunities for science fiction to dazzle us and to give us good stories again. I think we're in a pretty good spot, sci-fi story wise. As long as they give us new stories, I just don't want to. I don't want to like have a rehash. We've had like a decade of rehash stories and redos and reboots, and I think that's really the reason that the Kelvin timeline was so good. Is that it was like it wasn't just a reboot. It was a new story.
yeah, they also recognize the old story.
Yeah, it didn't just completely wipe this. It wiped the chalkboard clean, but it retained enough that it made sense. I think too frequently we were given like reboots that attempt to rewrite the entire story, and that's one way to do it, I guess.
Hmm.
Dune looks like they're going to try and just redo the interpretation of those stories, which I am excited for. But it also is trying to be more faithful to the actual literature itself. And then my understanding is that the Foundation series is being turned into a miniseries by Apple, and from what I've seen, it's on a galactic scale like we really haven't seen before. Also, I understand that Foundation provided a considerable amount of influence over the development of the Star Wars universe. So it'll be interesting to see what a real space empire looks like. Not one just, you know, thrown together for a movie, but one that was written by a science fiction author who, actually, now that I think about it, past they created so many he created so many stories within the Foundation universe that is probably becomes reiterative on its own at some point. Got to get that money though, right?
That's what it always ends up being, unfortunately. Well, because that's where like this Avengers game is on track to lose, I think, $60 million or something. Um, and it's like they shot themselves in the foot because the point was they were one of the things they were then they came out with it. They were saying that they were trying to make it so that it wasn't exploiting loot crates and all the pay to play stuff that a lot of other games suffered from. But then the game lacked in development because the fucking studios were trying to rush them and didn't want to put. There's times where you make passion projects, and the Avengers game should have been a passion project for the studios, where they're like, if we're gonna put 200 million in it, we're not gonna expect this money to be made back. We're trying to make this game for the legacy of the Avengers because it's not a good Avengers game.
Yeah.
And because they didn't do that, they have subpar sales with then a game that just ends up being like mediocre for um, casual fans. And then if you're like a big fan, it's like great at first, but then you realize like where the failings are. And it's just like, oh, you guys were so close. And it's just disappointing that they got really close to making something that's just fantastic on, but because they, again, if they're going to release it on PS5 and Xbox, uh, whatever Series X, and maybe they'll sell more then. But man, I just wish they like getting back to the cosmic level shit. It's like you had a chance to create cosmic level battles, and they didn't. And it ends up just being like, well, it's great that the Avengers are on street level stuff, and we got to find, do all this stuff that you're doing, but they limit it at a point where it just feels like the possibility to go higher is there, and you just see where they could have gone with it, and that's kind of where I'm like, there's a frustration when it comes to like the expectation of it has to sell because then it's not good for the sake of being good, and that happens with the um, live action stuff too, in like all genres.
Yeah. Well, someday they'll get it right. These game developers. Someday they'll figure. Someday, the software developer industry will figure out that.
I mean, LucasArts, their games have been on point for a while.
Yeah, it's true.
They very rarely fail.
They also have extremely story-driven games.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and they're all. That's what I mean. They're passion-driven games. Like that's a very um, like you go back and look at Force Unleashed and Force Unleashed 2. Those games still stand up with the gameplay and the story because clearly LucasArts just put passion into their product. Like
it's
even
funny.
the old Super Nintendo shit.
The Old Republic. I started playing that also casually, and it looks good, and the stories are good, and the fighting is good. Everything about it's pretty fun. Um, and the Star Trek game that I'm playing, it's also story driven, and there's PvP, and you can fleet up with people, but the stories, the stories are what does it. And I've been playing Eve for several years now, and I really enjoy it, and I've got a lot of time invested in it, but I don't find myself playing it as much because the story has turned into crap, and there is no story, actually. And Star Trek offers a story that is compelling.
Yes, a compelling story is just so necessary in 2020 to make a good game or anything for that matter. That's like not reality TV.
Who'd have thunk it? You have to have a good story
Right.
for your movie or your game to work. It can't just be about eye candy.
Yep.
Although the eye candy is getting pretty fucking good too. So
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And that's part of it is because there is such a proliferation of the capacity to make the eye candy. The story is what's setting things apart now. Um,
and even
yeah, it's like
even my aging video card, now 4 years old, even that thing is able to play the games that I've been engrossed in on like full ultra graphics mode. So it's not even like a prohibitively expensive universe to get into. You don't have to have a top of the line card anymore to play games at full resolution unless it's like a MMO where you've got 10,000 people on the same server all firing lines of light at each other. And even then those systems would be buffered so not everyone would have to interact with everyone at the same time or could even interact with everyone at the same time. It's definitely interesting.
yeah.
Exceptional Radio.
Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.